Hi, this is Jennie Walker, and welcome to the first episode of Start Talking. Start Talking is my new podcast. It's going to be focused on the consignment industry, the resale industry, which also includes thrift shops, charity shops, vintage boutiques, consignment stores, thrift stores. It's a whole group of organizations that really make this up. It doesn't include antique stores or pawn shops, but the consignment, resale, thrift, that stores in those industries. And the reason I am creating this podcast is to really dig deep into what's happening in the world of consignment and resale. And this is something that's been particularly interesting to me for decades. I entered my first consignment shop at the age of 13. My mother took me into a store in Columbus, Georgia. It was a little white house, wood house that had been painted. I turned into this consignment shop, and I remember going in there and really not understanding what kind of store this was. It was had a woman in there who was retired. I think she had been in retail earlier in her life, but she was in there and she was operating this little store. And I remember looking around at kind of two-piece women's suits and beaded sweaters like from the 50s and that had like saggy linings and beading on them and things like that. It was, kind of vintage. And I remember looking around and thinking, well, this is kind of different. This is interesting. It's not a department store. It's not the Goodwill. It's something else. And I can remember my mother, she bought something that day, and the woman who rung her up, I say rung her up, I mean, this is how long it's been. There was no ringing up. It was a sale that was written by hand in a sales book, jotted down on a little tiny 5x7 index card that was in a metal box, and everything was written by hand. I remember my mother writing a check, which is an anomaly. Nobody writes checks anymore. And she bought something which she loved, and we left, and I was just fascinated by the whole thing. And she knew the woman who was running the store and had heard about it and wanted to check it out. So that was my first introduction to consignment. And ever since then, I've just been fascinated by the whole concept of where does it all go. I mean, something that I understand now that I didn't understand then with the fashion industry pumping out fashion every season, and it just pumps and pumps and pumps this out. And like, where does it all go? I mean, it goes into people's closets. It's stored. It's who knows where it all goes. But they make it more than it dissipates. It's, if you think about recycling and how long it takes for something to decompose, if you will. That's not even the right word. What's the word? What is that word? It's not decompose, but to break down. I imagine it's years and years and years and years, maybe even decades, for one garment to break down. And yet we're pumping them out, every season. So I'm fascinated where it all goes. I'm fascinated with having to deal with stuff. There's a minimalist craze that's been going on, and I can kind of understand it with the whole KonMari kind of concept, but we're all drowning in stuff, and it's always a goal of mine to get organized, to get really condense everything that I have, but it just seems like an impossible task because it's always, I'm filling the hole, I'm filling this space once I create one. Anyway, that's kind of a sidebar, but I'm fascinated by the industry. I'm fascinated where it goes, the fact that consignment shops have really come into the mainstream. I mean, they're in the zeitgeist. You have very successful online shops like Linda's Stuff on eBay. She's the poster child for what can be for someone who's really focused and starting very modestly, selling, I think, video games. And now she's like one of the top, if not the top, eBay seller that does consignment. Then you have consignment stores like The Real, which is really an interesting story because they have venture capital money behind them. And like professionally, this whole industry has been taken on by someone. You have a lot of other stores like ThredUp and Tradesy, and there's just so many different, whether it's resale, consignment, a little of both, whether it's trading sites. There was one called Yerdle I had some experience on. They've now, shut it down, and it's now like a volunteer kind of thing on Facebook. They just couldn't make any money with the business model, but they did trade over 1 million items among people, which meant 1 million things weren't being bought new. So anyway, the whole thing just fascinates me, and decades later, I am now the owner, co-owner of a consignment shop at Pasadena called Walker Viden Luxury Consignment, and met my business partner, and it all happened as all good things do, unexpectedly, out of the blue, came out of nowhere. It's a whole different episode how that all came to me, but I have to tell you, I'm sitting here talking to you on this podcast, and I couldn't be happier. I'm probably in one of the happiest times of my life, having all of the wonderful, wonderful task of building a business from scratch. But it doesn't feel like work. We put in 12-hour days, and I basically just go until my body stops, and then I just leave, and then I come home. But we want to get into all that. So I think because I'm interested that other people are interested in this topic and really understanding some of the dynamics behind consignment, selling something, what it takes to sell something, what is valuable and what isn't, and what makes something highly sought after or something else. You can't give it away. So these are all topics I like, and hopefully you will too, and you'll tune into all of that. I want to get into the business side of opening up a consignment shop. I want to get into the marketing aspects of it. There's pretty much, this is my assessment, but probably 99% of these shops are independently owned and operated. The chains, you can count on one hand the major consignment chains in the country, and the online stores, just so few compared to the, I guess, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, I'm not sure the number, of shop owners there are around the country. And that's just in this country. I mean, they're all around the world, actually, at this point. So yeah, that's a lot of people who's involved in this industry, and I want to talk about everything that's great about it, everything that's not great about it, some of the dynamics that are in this industry, some of the emotion that's attached to it. There's a lot of emotion attached to things. And just my experience as someone who has consigned. I've consigned with stores. I've met store owners. I've bought in stores. I've consigned my own things. I've bought other people's things. I've just sort of studied it on my own for years, that and fashion in general, just because I'm very passionate about it. And I want to bring all that together and talk about it in this podcast. So this is the introduction. I am busy lining up people to interview as I speak to you now. People that I think bring a interesting perspective to it from the level of someone who's been on the board for NARTS, the National Association of Resale Professionals, and people who've owned stores, people who own vintage stores, consignment stores, thrift stores, people who've shopped in them. So I really want to give the whole perspective on what's happening in the industry. And there you go. This is what this is about, and I hope you'll tune in and subscribe and stay tuned. So, this is Jennie Walker, co-founder of Walker Viden Luxury Consignment in Pasadena, California. You can learn more about me and the store that I have at www.walkerviden.com, WALKERVIDEN.com. And Walker Viden is our handle on Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook. So you can follow us all there or subscribe on our website and get our email list and all of that. So there you have it. Jennie Walker, co-founder of Walker Viden Luxury Consignment, with Start Talking. So now it's time to stop talking. And there we have it. And there's nothing wrong with that.